can, of course, access the 4G, which exposes them to a lot more than what a 2G can. So yeah, thank you very much, and we hope to see you in the future.
Thanks a lot. We'll appreciate it.
Cool. Next up, we are going to be talking about cyber resilience. This is quite an interesting topic to me, particularly because it speaks about, private-public partnership, and how it shapes, protecting the public data. It's always the fight between, government and the private sector, to say, do we go completely private, or do we go, completely public, as in nationalizing these assets? But I think, from so far, the engagement has been, a collaboration between various different bodies always proves to be more profitable than, when it's one-sided. So Mr. Ebo Richardson is going to be joining us now. He is the Group Director of the Transformation Enterprise Program and the Equity Group. And yeah, we're quite delighted. I mean, we're talking about how the threat landscape evolved. What are the biggest threats now? These are some quite interesting topics. Lastly, industry's plan for new technologies such as quantum computing. These are some very heavy terminologies. I'm sure, Mr. Ebo, you will be unpacking for us just, layer by layer, what these things mean, and, yeah, how we should prepare ourselves for what's coming ahead. Mr. Ebo, the platform is yours, and yeah, delight us, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Excellent, excellent. So, I'm a change maker, as you can tell from my title. I deal with change management, transformations, project management within an organization. And with my current organization, that is what I do, to try and make sure that all the activities, the change activities that the organization wants to embark in, are channeled in a positive way to get the outcomes that we want. So needless to say, when this topic was presented to me, I was inclined to look at it from that lens of, change. And the interesting thing, about change is that all change comes with risk. Okay, so change and risk, I like to say, are two sides of the same coin. And the reason for that is every time you introduce change, you introduce uncertainty. And uncertainty is actually the definition of risk, or an uncertainty of outcome is the definition of risk. So therefore, when you have any situation, particularly one that is to do with technology, to do with connectivity, the more changes you're trying to introduce, the more risks you're also introducing. And in that environment, that particular or those particular type of risks relate to technology, and therefore they're cyber in nature. So it throws this concept of cyber resilience right at the forefront, because you don't want to change, or you don't even want to stay as you are and be confronted with lots of different threats that could bring you down. But as the landscape changes, not only do the threats also increase, but potentially your defenses might be found wanting as a result. And what I find particularly interesting is the fact that this sort of change in landscape is introducing so much uncertainty. A lot of people call it VUCA, which is to do with the volatility and the uncertainty and the ambiguity, etc. And those threats then become really sort of mainstay. They become something that you really have to sort of think about and deal with. But because the landscape is changing so fast and the threats themselves are changing so fast, you essentially have a shifting goalpost. How do you deal with a situation where your goalpost has shifted? Because every answer, every solution that you provide may be found to be inadequate really quickly because the landscape is shifting so quickly. So I think that's what we are confronted with, and that's what many organizations, the leaders in many organizations have to deal with, from CEO through CISO, through CIO, and so on and so forth. I read in an IBM report recently that the the average cost of addressing a cyber threat or a cybersecurity breach of some sort has risen to around sort of $4.3 million. And if organizations then are confronted with this average cost and they have many of such incidents to deal with, then it becomes not only a very costly endeavor, but potentially an existential threat as well for many organizations. So how do you deal with this evolving, changing landscape, which is not only making it difficult for you to pin down your threats and address them, but also creating a situation where essentially you're not even sure what it is that you're dealing with? I think the issue of private and public partnerships has been mentioned, and I'd like to pick that up at the first instance. Why is that a good idea? Well, in my view, and in my experiences, it's a good idea because it brings different types of organizations together to try and remedy what is really a serious, potentially existential threat. Private companies have sharp expertise that they bring to bear because they're able to recruit some of the best talent in this area who bring their expertise, their knowledge, their experiences to bear. They also have innovation because they're able to invest in R&D and be able to look at, how do you combat these scourge, these threats that are shifting all the time by applying new thinking. What the government side also brings is scale, peculiar government sort of capabilities, ability to connect with other stakeholders, other markets, etc. And in bringing all of these things together, you're essentially then creating a mix that will help you to address the challenges that you're trying to address in a more holistic, big picture way, rather than tackling them in piecemeal, which then for a landscape that is changing all the time, that is moving all the time, becomes very ineffectual. Okay? So I think for me, that is really where that private-public partnership comes into its own, in the sense that it brings these elements together that creates something that is stronger than the sum of its parts, as it were. Okay. Now, in terms of the threat landscape itself and how it's evolving, well, I think there are a number of considerations in the sense that it brings these elements together that creates something that is stronger than the sum of its parts, as it were. Okay. Now, in terms of the threat landscape itself and how it's evolving, well, I think there are a number of considerations. Sincere apologies. I seem to be getting some feedback of what I spoke before, so that sort of unnerved me a little bit because I wasn't quite sure what was going on. But in terms of the threat landscape and how it's evolved, I think there are a number of factors also driving this. First of all, motives are changing. There are some ideological, political factors that are coming into it, like activists, etc. You're also having the availability of tools, the same tools that we want to use to service our customers and to solve problems, others may use to conduct attacks and other unsavory sort of acts. So that is happening also. And as I said earlier on, the threat landscape is expanding. There's a lot more potential. There's a lot more possibilities now. And the organizational vulnerabilities themselves are also expanding. Why? Because organizations are changing, they're transforming. And as I said earlier on at the outset, as you're changing, you're introducing risk. So now you're introducing new platforms, integrating to new partners, creating a landscape or a surface, an attack surface that is broader, that is bigger, because you're adding new capabilities, introducing new platforms, you're trying to service different areas of the market or different customer base. And all of these potentially could introduce vulnerabilities that you weren't aware of before. Imagine that you already have sufficient sort of security program, but it addressed known areas, things that you knew before. Now, all of a sudden, you're introducing a lot of unknown areas. So now your program has to deal with those as well. And if there are areas where, for instance, you have zero-day attacks, or areas where, for instance, it's immature and therefore there aren't many tried, tested, mature prophylactics or solutions, then essentially you're introducing vulnerabilities to your organization that you could be hit with. And that is something that, is keeping many CISOs and indeed some other C-level executives, up at night, because you might have an organization one day that's working well, and the next day you find yourself in quite a quagmire because of certain breaches or certain things like ransomware attacks and the like. So this calls for a look at the entire sort of ecosystem, because all manner of organizations are trying to connect. Connectivity is one of the foundational elements of any digital endeavor, because to be able to apply digital solutioning, you need to be able to reach out and touch customers and constituents in various different ways. So connectivity becomes important, and that creates a broader ecosystem of ISPs, the organizations themselves, the telcos, etc., in trying to achieve this. That can be costly to try and find a solid architecture that is not only promoting performance, speed, etc., but also promoting security. Finding that right balance could be extremely costly. Moving on swiftly to sort of common attacks that are still out there, that are still dominating the landscape. We still have a lot of phishing attacks. We have malware and ransomware attacks still happening. We have SMS-based phishing, which we call smishing. We have, trying to actively attack platforms that are known to be vulnerable or perceived to be vulnerable, Microsoft, for instance. So there's all kinds of things going on. But specifically, you then have things like, risks that are introduced by supply chain. And I think this is one of the areas I wanted to speak specifically about, because you as an organization might have very robust control framework, very robust control program, security control program, which is working for your organization. But in the endeavor to partner to deliver solutions, you then have not only partners, third parties as partners, but also suppliers. And we're trying to bring about efficiency in a digital age. So you integrate through technology connections, through networks, and you might then find yourself exposed to the same threats that a less secure partner or a less secure supplier or vendor may have. And a number of organizations that I'm aware of have been hit through that sort of methodology or that sort of approach. So now you not only have to be concerned with the security of your own organization, you also have to be concerned with the security of your partners, the security of your vendors, and possibly even the security of your users, in as much as any vulnerabilities there could seep back to your own organization. So it is required to be an ecosystemic approach now, because there is so much interconnectivity that looking at an organization in isolation is no longer adequate. And that is where we dovetail back into our conversation around PPP, private-public partnership, because that model then gives you the ability to take that ecosystem approach and that holistic view of all the elements in there, so that essentially you have a better chance of addressing the problems that would rear their ugly heads as a result of all manner of actors trying to exploit vulnerabilities in order to further some ends, whether they will be terrorism in nature, whether it's for financial gain, or indeed other motivations. Now, in terms of quantum computing, I think because of the changing nature of the threats that we face in this arena, and furthermore, the fact that the landscape is shifting and new tools, new capabilities, new threats are coming into the fray, every so often. Even zero-day attacks which present particular threats, because at the point of attack there are no known remedies. Because of all that, we need to sort of move into a new realm of thinking when you try to solve these problems. Einstein once famously said that you cannot solve problems with the same level of thinking that created those problems in the first place. So things like ideas like quantum computing provide a fresh perspective, fresh thinking, a whole new paradigm in trying to solve some of these problems, which essentially a different way of thinking, a different sort of solution set. And it's something that I think we need to look at along with other things, other possibilities, because essentially, what you're saying is you need stronger or more dynamic or more powerful capabilities in order to try and get ahead where possible of the existing threats that you face, but then also to try and match the potential new threats that are emerging all the time because of new capabilities. It gives us essentially more potency and an ability to be more innovative by leveraging on computing power that we have yet to really sort of to see. I think another one that practitioners are looking at the moment is how you may be able to implement zero trust architectures in organizations so that they kind of combat potential zero-day attacks as well. And I think that is something that is emerging and will become more and more important as we go along. So, I mean, from my perspective and looking at things, practically within the organizations that I've worked in, certainly the current one, but also the previous one that I was at, it's really about having a very practical and sustainable program that looks at all the threats, potentially current and also emerging, and how you would ensure that you have an ongoing, a continuous program to address them. One thing that Equity does, our group CISO has, all of her programs are in place and they're very robust and they're holistic and they look at so many things, from digital to physical to, platformic to behavioral, so it's a very rich and comprehensive program that she has in place. But one of the things that appeals to me in particular, and perhaps it is because I am a change maker, is the fact that they also look at the trajectory that change and transformation will take the organization. So, they look at what I do and how that will change the organization from the perspective of new capabilities that we bring in and how those should be assessed and included in any security program, from the perspective of vulnerabilities that we may create by the introduction or change of platforms, technologies, etc. But also from the perspective of the trajectory that our programs and our transformation agenda will take the organization and try and match that. So try and add security program capabilities that matches what we are doing on the change and transformation side. And I particularly like that because I think it speaks to the fact that, the world is not still. Things are changing very rapidly. I think it was Justin Trudeau who once said that the pace of change in the world right now has never been as fast as it is today, but yet it will never be as slow as it is today, which means we will continue to get faster and more dynamic things happening. And that means that the challenge for security, for risk, for cyber resilience, which this conversation really is about, is going to keep increasing. Because as things change faster and things become more dynamic, it produces a lot more uncertainty, a lot more volatility, a lot more ambiguity. And how do you protect your organizations in a world like that? And I think some of the things that we've spoken about here and in are important as we try to introduce mechanisms and programs and systems and even nurturing innovation to enable us to address this sort of changing landscape and the increasing threats that they bring for us as organizations and the businesses trying to co-create value for various stakeholders. So in a nutshell, those are the points that I wanted to raise, in particular how organizations and the markets and the customers and the change trajectories that they go through, how you can be thinking about cyber resilience within that context and the programs that you must put in place in order to try and address those critical elements, which, as I noted earlier on, are fast becoming existential threats. In today's world, the wrong type of cyber breach, the wrong type of cyber activity that hits you, or cyber threat that hits you, could end up crippling your organization and bringing you down. So it's something that we need to take very seriously, and we need to take an ecosystemic approach to doing so. So thank you very much. It's a short and sweet message. And if there are any questions, I'll do my best to address them. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Richardson. Not a lot of people know this. Mr. Richardson is a dear friend and an amazingly, good expert that has brought together, so many projects to the peak of its success, having led teams with AXA, having played the role of a CIO, COO, CTO, CDO, CISO, today leading the biggest group in Kenya. Thank you so much, Mr. Richardson, for bringing in such amazing content and great deal of knowledge and sharing it with delegates across the globe.
It's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for inviting me. Hopefully, I will have the opportunity to share more insights other times. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much on that. Moving on, up next is my most favorite part of the day, right? And I believe a lot